Okay, questions? Yes, sir.
How can the redistricting hurt your campaign?
Okay, the question is about the redistricting because, as you know, every 10 years by the Constitution, the census must be taken. And of course, redistricting based upon population shifts. A little bit of background: Florida's going to pick up 2 new congressional districts because of population growth. One's going to be up in the Orlando area, another's going to be on the West Coast. The problem is, I think you saw some of the preliminary maps that came out in Tallahassee, the state and the House, and it would redraw this district to a bit of a disadvantage for me by putting more Democrat precincts into the district. You know, I'm not traveling to Tallahassee. I don't have a lobbyist up there. I don't have a lawyer up there. I'm not a politician. And the thing that, whatever the district comes back to be, I will sit down and I will do my best to win that district. Will it be a little bit harder if they come out with you know, a map where they throw in more Democrats? Absolutely. But I go back and I, you know, tell you all, study Alexander the Great. Alexander the Great conquered the known world. And in each and every battle that you study, his major battles, he never had odds better than 1 to 4. But he was a master strategist and tactician. So guess what? If it comes back and they draw it in that way, you'll find me located in some little bunker, and I'll have all kind of butcher paper and everything up on the walls, and we will figure out how we're going to get in, and we're going to micro-target, and we need you to help us out there so that we can have an effective and strong ground game. And this also comes back to another thing. The challenge for us, go out and talk to 5 people that don't believe like you do. And out of those 5, convince 3. Convince 3 that limited government that is fiscally responsible and constitutionally mandated is the right direction. Convince 3 people that individual rights and freedoms and individual responsibility and accountability is the way forward for our country. Convince 3 people that the free market and free enterprise system of the United States of America will get these closed storefronts open back up again, and we can get production and manufacturing coming back to this country with the right type of tax policies for our corporations and businesses. Convince 3 people that there is such a thing as traditional values that we have here in America. Now that may be tough, but you at least got to have that conversation. Convince 3 people, as Ronald Reagan said, you have peace through strength. And we've got to have a strong national defense. Do we need to change the paradigm of how we're fighting on this 21st century battlefield? Absolutely. But I'm telling you, we have all the right points. They are failing. The fact that the White House Chief of Staff said, bye-bye, that should let you know that something is going on up there, and there are people starting to see, I can't continue on this way. Yes, sir.
Things to read. I read the Sun Sentinel, of course, and a few magazines. What's a good, not right wing, left wing, but something that's fair and balanced?
Well, I think that you need to go back and read classical economic theory writings.
No, I meant current events. Like
current events. Yeah, like, oh, I'm sorry. I thought you meant like a reading list. Look, American Spectator is a very good one. I think you should also go to the Heritage Foundation website. Also go to Cato Institute. They have many good pieces and articles that you can pull down, you know, that look at different things: energy independence, economic policy, national security policy, foreign relations, immigration policy, because that's what you have to be able to do. Now, I will tell you another thing that we try to do for you is to our website, we try to post information, current information, stats, figures, things of this nature. So that you can go out there, you can say when the president was elected, unemployment was 7.8%, the high point was 9.4%. So you can do that comparative analysis. You can talk to people about the fact that we have seen about $4.5 trillion of new debt under this president, which is more from 1776 to 1992. So we want to try to provide those type of resources to you even off of our congressional website. And I'm trying to think, what's the other, Human events. Human events, absolutely. Human events or Weekly Standard. Weekly Standard is another good one to pick up. Yes, ma'am.
What is your gut feeling? What is your gut feeling about who has the best chance of being
what she said? She said, when your gut feeling, okay, you know when you say gut feeling, you're in trouble. The question is, who do I feel has the best chance of being the president? Let me give you the scenario. Don't focus on a person as an entity. You know, the 6 people. Now, I do believe by the time we get to the Florida primary, you'll probably be down to 4. What you got to understand, you're talking about someone that has an impeccable charisma, and he has the world's largest megaphone. And what you have to be able to do is you have to be able to match that charisma. You have to have an image that will draw the American people. You have to have the communicative skills to be able to articulate the contrast between the president, who he is, what he stands for, and an American vision. And you got to be passionate about it. I think that the problem that we see with our candidates is they don't show that type of passion, you know, really. But no, you don't need me. I'm fine where I am. You know, I'm just a rookie. You know, I've been 1 year in politics out of my entire life. But that's what we have to have. Now, this is the problem that I will say, and take notes, Chairman. The Republican Party has to get away from leadership by entitlement. The Republican Party has to start growing the next generation of leadership. They cannot continue to sit around and say, who's next? Because that's how we're doing things. You think about, you know, how the Democratic Party at the national level, how they do things. Who had ever heard of Jimmy Carter other than people like me that were, you know, born and raised in Georgia? Who had ever heard of Bill Clinton other than people that were out there in Arkansas? Who had ever heard of Barack Obama? They take chances on people, they take risks on people, and they beat us on image. That's exactly where people are following. They're following image, they're following charisma, they're following rhetoric. And what we do is we get people to come up and they seem the same old stodgy type of politician that is not able to have a direct connection with the American people. And that's what we got to break that down. We've got to have someone that represents an American image. Of course you got a chance. No, of course you got a chance. I'm not going to, but, you know, do not take this for granted. Remember this very simple statistic. 47% of wage-earning households in the United States of America don't pay any federal income tax. 47%. Now, when you think about the 41% increase in food stamp recipients, how many folks remember back in 2008 when the young lady stood up and said, if I vote for him, I will not have to put gas in my car, I will not have to pay my mortgage. Okay? Guess where she was standing when she said that? Bank Atlantic Center, right here, Sunrise, Florida. So don't think that these are people that are in, you know, inner city Atlanta, Chicago, or wherever. It's right here in your backyard. That's why you got to talk to 5 people. When you go to your gas station and you go inside to the gas station attendant, take a minute. The people that come and do your yards, take a minute. Because the people in here are not going to make the difference in the election. It's the folks that are out there walking around every day. You know, it's the folks that when I went to have a Christmas party at my chief of staff's house yesterday in Boca Raton, the security guards did not know who I was. They thought my wife, they said, oh, Dr. West, you're the VIP. Oh, yeah, she's the VIP. They had no clue, she is a VIP, but they had no clue who I was. Those are the people that we're going to have to affect. Wow. Because if not, they will follow image and not message. Yes, sir.
Taking into consideration your background and the demographics of the counties that you represent, what gave you the confidence or the chutzpah?
Because I'm a mensch. Okay, the question is, what gave me the chutzpah to run a second time when you were defeated the first time? Because I'm a paratrooper. Paratroopers hate losing. Okay? And I wasn't going, look, I knew that we could have won in 2008. We just didn't have enough time. If there had been another month or two, we probably could have pulled it out in 2008. But, you know, I love this country too much to quit. And so you come back and you continue to fight. And let me continue on with something else, okay? We got to be smart in 2012. Okay, because the other side has nothing to stand for. They're looking for the cheap shot. They're looking for the means by which they can characterize you as an extremist, as a wacko, and all these type of things. So you got to be very careful and understand, how do you look at them and find their weakness that you can exploit? You know, don't do something that turns President Obama into the victim. Don't do something that makes President Obama the martyr, and then he can rally people. You got to defeat him based upon the failures of his policies. And when you get people to start yelling and screaming back at you, guess what? You got them. Now understand that there's a 35 to 40% out there. You're not going to be able to make a difference. And that's why I told you, pick 5, convince 3. That's where we're going to be able to win this. Because there are certain states, if you go to the National Journal, the National Journal did an interview and it talked to the Obama campaign manager, and they laid down their 4 scenarios. There are certain states that they're going to go and try to compete and win in, because it's all about the electoral vote. And then based upon certain scenarios, either they win those 19 states and Florida, or they win those 19 states and Virginia and North Carolina, those 19 states and some western states like Colorado, New Mexico, and Nevada. That's the level of detail that they are planning. And we need to be that smart in planning to that level. So that's why someone like Chairman DiNapoli, you sit down and you micro-target this based upon precincts. That's the type of analysis. So I expect him to be down in that bunker too, you know, with butcher paper all around.
I'll be with you.
There you go.
With your background, a lot of people say you're a great senator. Are you married to the Congress forever, or do you think in the future you might consider running for president?
Well, look, when I look at the Senate, when I look at the fact that the Senate hadn't passed a budget in 1,000 days, when I look at the fact that they've got about 30 pieces of legislation sitting over there, when I look at the fact that the Senate decided Christmas vacation was more important than having good policy, I'd rather be in the House of Representatives, okay? And the House of Representatives is the people's house. And what we got to get folks to understand, the Founding Fathers were brilliant in the structure of our government. The most important branch in Washington, D.C. is the legislative branch. The most important of that is the House of Representatives. That's why every 2 years you have to be reelected. That's where the fight is, and that's where I want to stay. And, you know, I don't know what God has planned for me. You know, a few years back, I was running around training Afghan soldiers. So you don't know what's going to happen in your life, but for right now, the House of Representatives is where I'd like to be. Yes, sir.
What is Congress going to do to stand up to Obama with some of the regulations and all that he's been pushing through?
Well, this is what you have to understand. That's why you are going to have to run the table and get someone in the White House. Because when cap and trade could not go through legislatively, he turned to Lisa Jackson in the EPA, and that's why they've been running crazy. When card check could not go through legislatively, he turned over to the Department of Labor, the National Labor Relations Board, and they've been run crazy. Now, I will tell you that these recess appointments, I talked to some of my colleagues today, we're going to do something to, you know, kind of spank his hand about, you know, trying to supersede the Congress and this contempt that he has for Congress. But once again, go back and study. This is exactly what Harry Truman did. Harry Truman ran against a quote-unquote do-nothing Congress. Now, the difference between with Harry Truman and today, information flows a lot better. You know, I don't think in the days of Harry Truman, someone was right in his face with a camera and could post a video of his speech within an hour of him finishing. So the thing is, the truth is out there, and we must be able to educate each other to show that it is not about a do-nothing Congress, it's about the failures of this president. It is not about him bypassing Congress to do his ideological agenda. That goes against the structure of a constitutional republic. Last time we had someone like this, it was called King George III, and I think we kind of got rid of it. Nah. All right, back in the back. No, Al, yeah, and then Al.
Good evening, Congressman. With all due respect, I'm concerned that the NDA is in infringing my Fourth Amendment rights, i.e. indefinite detention. Would you please comment on that for us?
Sure, I will. And I will tell you that I spoke at the Boca Raton Tea Party. The National Defense Authorization Act. Every year you have to pass the National Defense Authorization Act for the funding of the military and also the guidance that comes from the legislative branch. And I will tell you, if you go to page 657, you will see in subparagraph Bravo, subparagraph 1 and 2, that tells you that the military has no rights to detain U.S. citizens or legal immigrants here in the United, or legal aliens here in the United States of America. And you know, our staff can provide you with also the summary reports that were printed out on the 12th of December that also said that. So what I challenge people that have said, you know, those type of things, show me in the NDAA anything that contradicts those statements, which are right there on page 657. Now, the military has a requirement. The military has a requirement to detain Al-Qaeda, Taliban, and associated forces, and those who substantially support them. That's it. The military cannot do anything with American citizens. Now, the National Defense Authorization Act comes from the Department of Defense, or is for the Department of Defense. The House Armed Services Committee, Senate Armed Services Committee, we meet. We cannot say anything to FBI or the law enforcement agencies. That falls under the oversight jurisdiction of your committee on the judiciary. Okay, so the defense cannot do anything. As a matter of fact, that would be a violation of posse comitatus, and so they can't do it. And I was telling the gentleman back here, I'll give you two examples. Carlos Bledsoe. Name sound familiar? Carlos Bledsoe, African American, born and raised in Memphis, Tennessee, converted to Islam, changed his name, traveled outside the country to Somalia and Yemen, got terrorist training, came back to Little Rock, Arkansas, and shot 2 U.S. soldiers at the Little Rock, Arkansas recruiting station. Killed one, wounded the other. Carlos Bledsoe is not in Guantanamo Bay, even though we found he had a target list in his trunk, which and he subscribed to radical Islamic beliefs. The New York Times Square bomber, American citizen, nothing happened. He went through a court process. Major Malik Nadal Hassan, okay, who stood on the table at Fort Hood, Texas, my last duty assignment. He's still awaiting his proceedings under military court there in Texas. And there was a point he was still being paid as a major. So we're not doing anything that will violate. As a matter of fact, I will tell you this, Ed, we're bending over backwards. Never forget that the 12 Somali pirates who killed 4 Americans on their yacht, they're in Virginia waiting for their day in court. The underwear bomber, who was not an American citizen, was read Miranda rights, waiting for a day in court. See the problem? I mean, we are really bending over backwards to try to play a very politically correct means by which we're prosecuting this war, and that concerns me. The guy in Tampa, naturalized U.S. citizen, he's not going to go to Guantanamo Bay. He's going to go right through the normal court system. No, I'm Al Massey, and then I'll come back. Yeah.
Thank you, Alan. I'm not completely confident that the Supreme Court is going to find any aspect of Obamacare unconstitutional. Is there any move in Congress to repeal Obamacare?
Well, we did that. We did that in January of last year in the House of Representatives. And that's another one of those things that are sitting over there on Harry Reid's desk. You know, let me use a football metaphor, since, you know, we're in football season is a pretty important game about to start. I'm an SEC football nut. Harry Reid is a pulling guard for President Obama. Harry Reid is going to clear, you know, block and clear so that President Obama can do whatever he wants. And that's why you got to win the Senate. Okay? So that's sitting over there, and, you know, based upon what our founding fathers established, you can't make the Senate bring something up. As a matter of fact, cut, cap, and balance back in August. Harry Reid said, I'm tabling it. And that's what they can do. This is a serious ideological fight that we're having up in Washington, D.C. There are people that believe in the growth of the bureaucratic nanny state. And let me tell you what happens if you don't win the White House. A year from now, The United States of America will see the largest tax increase in its history. The 11 new taxes of the Paycheck Protection and Affordable Care Act will kick in. 159 new government agencies and bureaucracies, 16,000 new IRS agents, a board of 15 unelected bureaucrats that will decide the funding levels of Medicare, $500 billion of cuts to Medicare. That what kicks in January 2013 out to January 2018. And I guarantee you that the Bush tax cuts will expire if he is reelected, because we probably won't have enough for that 2/3 majority override of a veto from the president. So he will get 4 more years, and furthermore, he will say that the American people returned me back, so they must agree with my agenda. That's why it's important. And we haven't even started talking about Supreme Court justices. This is a critical election cycle. Yes, sir. No.
What effort is the Republican Party making to practice stranglehold that the Democratic Party has on the African American community, Jewish what efforts are being made?
Well, you're looking at one effort, which is why they don't like me. No, absolutely. I mean, you're absolutely having an effect, because back in September of this year, a Washington Post survey went out there. President Obama, his strongly approved number in the African American community went from 83% to 58%. When I get back up to Washington, D.C., we're having a Black Conservative Forum in the Capitol, which C-SPAN will be covering, so pay attention to that. But think about the unemployment figures. Unemployment in the African American community is 15.8%. Unemployment for Black adult males is over 20%. Unemployment for Black teenagers is between 40 to 45%. That's what's causing the problem for the sheriff. When you looked at those teenagers, those flash mobs, and those riots in Philadelphia, it's a direct reflection. Now, when you all of a sudden start talking to people about fair share and wealth redistribution and things of that nature, that's the group that he's looking to target. But what we have to do is educate the Black community and get them to once again remember. You know, it's so funny when I hear people talk about, you know, if you have a voter ID, an ID card to go vote, that's bringing back Jim Crow. The next time you hear someone say that and they're a Democrat, say, you should know, because you were the guys that brought Jim Crow the first time. Okay? And that's the type of thing that we have to start educating folks on. Civil rights legislation would not have passed if it weren't for a Senate Republican by the name of Everett Dirksen. That's what we have to start talking to people. The Democrat Party, and this is what I tell a lot of people in the Black community, stands for 4 S's. Slavery, secession, segregation, and socialism. And none of those 4 S's has benefited the Black community. We got to be able to.
What attempts would the Republicans make to go to Black churches and having them, you know, this is a grassroots fight. This is made up.
Oh, it is. I mean, it is.
Levels of Congress.
I spoke to a gathering of Black pastors up there on Capitol Hill, and look, we just got to continue doing it. That's part of the micro-targeting that you have in every single county, every single precinct. You have to get out there. Once again, you're not going to win over everybody. How many people you got to win over? 3 out of 5. Yes, sir.
There's a lot of talk at the Rick Santorum camp that you're seriously being considered for a VP thing. I know you're loyal to the district, but would you accept it if you got offered?
You're making that up. You know what Rick Santorum's talking about. Well, I tell you what, I'm not wearing one of those sweater vests. I tell you what. No way, that went out. So you go back and tell them get rid of the sweater vest, and I'll think about it. Look, like I said, I don't know.